Nick, do the shoes match the shirt is what I want to know.
Normally, actually, you know what they do? They do. I was
they?
going to say, normally I'm like doing these calls without any shoes on. So because I'm at home, but I'm going out today. So I actually have some cool shoes that match it.
And once again, welcome to the Digital Customer Success Podcast. I'm Alex Turkovich. I'm so glad you could join us here today and every week as I seek out and interview leaders and practitioners who are innovating and building great scale CS programs. My goal is to self-educate and bring you along for the ride so that you get the insights that you need to evolve your own digital customer success program. If you want more info or you need to get in touch or sign up to get the latest updates from us, go to digitalcustomersuccess.com. But for now, let's get started with today's show. Welcome to episode 12 of the Digital Customer Success Podcast. It's great to have you here. There are a handful of people that I'm sure you would agree with me could be classified as customer success royalty. And the word royalty can come across as elitist, authoritarian, generally not kind of a friendly term. However, the reason that I would classify Kellie Capote and Nick Mehta of Gainsight as CS royalty isn't because of exclusion, it's because of inclusion, and it's because of their approach to the CS community and their willingness to jump in and help and be part of the conversation, and in a lot of ways own the conversation. Goes without saying, I'm very excited for today's episode where we talk with Nick and Kellie about digital customer success, of course, but we go beyond that a little bit. We talk about revenue ownership in CS. We talk about diversity in tech. We talk about standing out in the job market. And it's a really cool conversation. And I'm not going to stand in the way of you and that conversation anymore. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Kellie Capote and Nick Mehta of Gainsight. I know I sure did.
Hey, Alex.
Hey, how are you?
Hi there. How you doing? Can you hear me?
Hey, yeah, I can, Nick. How you doing?
Okay, doing great. Good to see you.
Good. Man, look at that shirt.
Always, yeah. Trying to
Mr.
bring it.
Fashion. He's always fashionable.
Always fashionable. I know y'all's time is, super, super valuable. And I want to, thank you guys so much for taking the time out of your day to join me. Are y'all in both of your home offices?
Yes, we are. We actually only work from home, so we don't have any offices in the U.S.
Y'all's home offices look better than most people's offices.
Oh, Kellie, look at that. Kellie just built a new house, so she's super happy.
I just moved in like a week ago, so I appreciate that. And Nick had a little remodel of his office.
Yeah, that's right.
Make it fabulous.
You've got the wood paneling gives you nice like 70s, 80s vibe.
Exactly what I'm going for.
Good. I'm glad. I think both of your histories and journeys have been relatively well documented, but I do want to dig in a little bit here before we get into the crux of digital CS and all the fun topics we have for today. And Kellie, I want to start with you because you have what has been described and could only be described as kind of a meteoric rise, right, into where you are today. And I mean, is it was there something in the water at Penn State, or like how much of it do you attribute to? Because I know you've said before in previous interviews that it's like. You attribute a lot of it to cross-functional relationships and just having that quote unquote bulldog mentality. But how much of this is, just growth mindset and just attacking versus, just you being you?
Yeah, first of all, I love the background details you have on Penn State and all the fun stuff.
By the way, Kellie, I didn't want to interrupt, but it was not something in the water, but Penn State's something in the keg tap, right? Is that the that's the appropriate?
That's probably more realistic.
It's not in the water; it's in the keg.
Yeah, exactly.
More realistic. But yeah, it's a combination of both, right? I think from my early days, even growing up from a family perspective, there's strong work ethic that's been, just instilled in my DNA and my mindset. But truly, when it comes to, I think, Gainsight and my trajectory here, first of all, I've had amazing leadership and folks like Nick and our former CCO. But I'm also very passionate about it. So it's something I wake up every single day, and like, it's not just a job to me. Like, I get excited and I get to problem solve and I get to help trailblaze, like, what's the next iteration of customer success. So it's always felt fun. In general, I love new challenges and I get bored very easily. So I'm always proactively seeking out like the next thing I can go do, or, a process I can help tweak or, evolutionize for the business. So I think it was really just a perfect intersection for me of, I think, some of my strengths, which are relationship building and cross-functional relationships. I am very data driven. So I like, even when it comes to customer success, bringing that different mentality of making it more data driven, right? And kind of metrics oriented. And I think that was probably a big piece of my brand here at Gainsight in terms of really helping to scale the CS organization as we had to really put some, like, a blueprint in place.
And can I just embarrass Kellie more and just answer it also from my perspective, which is, three things I think Kellie does amazingly that I think really are critical for an ACCO. Just awesome performance orientation, because it is a performance job. I think that's like where people miss it, where they think of it as like a service job, but there's like numbers to hit. Number two is like strangely like excited about challenges, like you said, right? So runs into the fire instead of running away from it. And then third is just like awesome communication and leadership skills. Because obviously you're running a big team. How do you bring them together? But also you're running a customer community. How do you bring that customer community together? Kellie's definitely like the voice of the CCO community, and that has a huge impact on our customers. So
yeah, for sure. And I think you also mentioned an operative word there, which is fun. Like, I think if you're having fun doing what you're doing, it's a lot easier to kill it than if you're just like grinding away.
100%.
Because it's a passion, it becomes a passion, not just a job.
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, speaking of which, Nick, I wonder how much, I'm curious what the decision-making process was from going from a biochemistry undergrad to computer science, because those two aren't in the same ballpark, really. So what talked me into, like, 20-ish years old Nick, and what you were doing back then, what led you to those decisions?
Back in the 1950s. So of course I always knew my destiny was in customer success, right, Alex? That's the answer, I should say. But
absolutely.
The truth is, it was really that, like, the question was, how long could I go disappointing till I disappoint my mom? That's basically the question. So my mom wanted me to be a scientist or doctor, go to college. I really like computers and programming, and I like business. My dad was actually in business too. But my mom really wanted me to go in science. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do biochemistry, continue the roost that I'm going to be a doctor or researcher someday. And then, but I got into college like 1 year. I was like, I actually I don't love this stuff. And I still finished my bachelor's because I was already, half in there. But then I kind of ended up doing a master's in computer science, like at the same time. Now, funny story is I saw my mom over the weekend, and she constantly brings up why I didn't go into science all the time. And we have a family friend, actually my daughter's girlfriend's mom. And she works at Genentech, which is like obviously a big biotech company. And I was like, oh yeah, Linda works at Genentech. My mom was like so excited. And then Linda, our friend, says, oh yeah, she has a PhD actually in molecular biology. So super, science. But then my mom's like, what do you do at Genentech? She's like, I'm actually a lawyer. And my mom was so disappointed. She's disappointed in Linda too, not just me. She's disappointed in Linda. If she meets any of you, she'll be disappointed that you're not scientists. So that's a very long answer, but the honest truth.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, it served you. I will say it served you well. And yeah, of course, you were predestined to be in CS, as I think a lot of us are, right? Because CS is relatively new, and 20 years ago, we didn't go out to get our undergrads in CS, and I know there's now programs that are established around the the practice, which is super exciting.
And I think there's two things that probably are true for Kellie and myself, and probably yourself and others, which is, like I like people. So you probably can't do CS if you don't like people realistically.
No.
And then number two is I like new things. So
Yeah.
if you like, I was actually at like, at our Pulse conference and like we were talking about, I was doing the keynote and I talked about, growth mindset. I'm sure you know what that is, right? Where you're always open to changing and growing. And like, I think if you don't like changing and growing, you would hate this job because it's so new. And every year somebody's like, what's the point of CS? Like, what's the ROI? Why should we do it? Like most companies, it doesn't happen in Gainsight, obviously, but most companies, like the CS leader every year has to sort of redefine the role and re-advocate,
resell the business,
resell it like internally and externally.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't like that, like the constant change, you would hate this job, right? You have to go do something much more established, so.
Absolutely. Where my mind goes now is do you, I mean, obviously as Gainsight, being a CSP and
Right.
being there for CS professionals, you folks tend to be, and I speak, I speak about this being a customer because I do look to you guys for examples. Do you feel a lot of pressure to be kind of the poster childs, and how much do you carry those pressures into your decision making?
Kelly, you can take that
That's
one.
funny. I get this question all the time. Like I'll meet new executives and they're like, no pressure, Kelly. You have to like be the CCO at like the CS company. I'm like, I got enough pressure already. Stop it. But no, I think it goes back to like, I love problem solving and that pressure actually gets me excited and motivated. But it's something, it's a guiding principle that I share with my organization every single time I meet with them. Like we have to truly, like if we're going to go out there and kind of trailblaze and help folks understand like what's the next best thing, what do you need to do from a prescriptive perspective when it comes to customer success, like we need to truly genuinely be doing those things ourselves. So I like to say drinking our own champagne. So when we think about even digital customer success, right? Well, if we're going to go talk about it, we've got to be embracing it and putting things into practice so they're not just empty words. So again, that's why we're always constantly, like if you look at my priorities and things for the year, there's always ones that's like elevating our own CS organization so that we can be that great thought partner to not only just our customers, but the industry at large. Because there is no doubt in my mind that when we're doing these things ourselves, we're that much better at really locking arms and helping other people navigate these situations as well.
And then the only thing I'd add in, Alex, is like, if we want to be the role model for CS, part of that is being open that like we're going to get some things wrong, right? We're going to evolve. Like, it's not like we're perfect, like, because there's no way to do it, right? They can't be perfect. And so I think like an example of that, which probably ties to the theme of this podcast, is, early on, we do a pyramid that says, okay, you have a high touch, low, mid touch, and digital. And digital is like your small customers. I think we all know now, digital is a strategy that can apply up and down.
Not a segment.
Not a segment. And so I think that's the kind of thing where like, we will get things wrong too, but then we'll like try to learn and get better. And I think every CS leader has to have that mindset that you will get things wrong.
So much of being in CS is like knowing how to fall on your sword.
Yes, totally.
Yes, because there's definitely experimentation that's going to happen. And pulling that thread a little bit further, Nick, I think we've also gotten really good at saying like, this isn't all coming just from us.
No.
Like if you think about Pulse, like it's about building a community around this. And that's why we've really been leaning into community as well to bring these folks together based on their stages and their shared experiences, because then it's even that much more robust to really, really help them along the way.
And that's a good point, Kelly, too, because I think, we are learning from our customers, and then we're also like humble with our customers that sometimes we do fall on the sword, Alex, to your point. Like actually, it was just funny, random thing. I was talking to one of our like new prospects, and like they're a long time customer for the past. And she came into this company, they were using another CS platform. It was a good platform, actually, somebody I respect. But she said that like that company had an issue and there was a problem, like a survey went out to all their customers accidentally, something like that. And those mistakes happen. But she said the issue was the way that vendor responded. Like it wasn't actually that the issue happened. It's like owning up to it. Yes, this was our fault. Like, yes, this is what we're doing to prevent it, versus like, blame shifting, so I think anyone that's good in CS, like is able to be humble enough to own the problem.
We all know we've sent the wrong email to the wrong person at the wrong
Everyone has done
time.
that. Dear first name or whatever, like dear.
That's the worst. Your heart just drops. Yes.
Yeah, we've definitely done
Yeah. Sending exit interview emails to customers who haven't exited. Super fun.
that's a good one to learn from.
And so, this is the Digital CS podcast. One of the things that I am trying to do is I'm trying to connect with everyone, right? From the operations person to the systems admin to the marketing person to the digital CS in the field to the executive level. And I want to pull together kind of this holistic view of what is digital CS, because it means a little bit something different to different people depending on who you talk to and what they do in their functional lives. And so I'm building this definition of digital CS word map. It's going to be on the website. I would love from
Nice.
you guys just your elevator pitch on what is digital CS.
All right, Kelly, you answer this question every day. Why don't you go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. So I love that you're doing this. I can't wait to see the final output of your word cloud. But
Yeah.
when I think about customer success, let me start by saying I'm incredibly passionate that digital customer success is going to be like the next frontier of customer success. And I think it's grounded in the fact that this is how you're actually going to deliver the experience that your customers expect. So it's not, I mean, there are certainly internal benefits, right, in terms of scaling your CS organization. But really for me, what I get excited about is it's leveraging, all the technological advancements that have happened and kind of meeting the modern era of customer expectations to deliver them that personalized experience based on the persona, user, point in time, through all these different omni-channel journeys. So for me, it's about kind of staying current and with the time and extending that experience to all users, not just that core set of stakeholders that we have the ability, to engage with just a CSM. So CSMs don't go away, but we're going to be able to augment that relationship and kind of give it digital superpowers, as we like to say, Nick.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's when at Pulse I talked about how like this thing we put up a long time ago, this equation that was like customer success CS equals getting your customers the outcomes they're looking for. What we said CO plus giving them a great experience, CX. So that was sort of like a simple way to talk about it years and years ago. And we kind of put a little D as the exponent to make it even nerdier, like digital superpowers, like Kelly said.
I love that.
And I think the like thing that I think about there, which fits what Kelly said, is part of it is scaling more efficiently, right? Because obviously you'd love to have CSMs be able to reach more accounts and things like that, more self-service. But part of it, I think what Kelly said is so right on. Like even if you're CSM and you have one account, you cannot connect with every user, right? There's no way. And those users could be really influential. So like, and frankly, those users may not want to meet with you, right? Like the CEO of the company
Right.
using your software does not want to meet with the CSM, like 9 times out of 10, right? So this idea of more stakeholders that Kelly talked about, I mean, every CSM wants it. They don't want to be single threaded, but you can't do that just through kind of one-on-one video meetings, right? So I think it really does change things.
Yeah, I love how the conversation is changing. Even when you think of previous, Pulse conferences, they were very
Yeah.
focused on, CSMs and career and
Right.
CSM growth and things like that. And it's still focused that way, but it's focused in a way to how can we operationally make the CSM more effective at what
Yes.
they do. It's not, more with less. It's more better.
Yeah. More
That's
better.
absurd. I think very often it can get kind of stuck under this umbrella of like EBITDA and we have to scale, which is great. That's certainly an added benefit. But I think it's also more effective, right? Because then your CSMs can focus on the high value activities that they really need to be doing, right, in a human led way. And we need to kind of learn from our B2C experiences and how everything else in our life is so personalized.
So
and that's what's kind of transferring over to the B2B world. And if we don't get ahead of that, I think we're going to get, left in the dust, so to speak.
For sure. One of my favorite digital motions that you guys have that I recently had the pleasure of experiencing was I logged in. This is shortly after I got my level 3 cert or whatever. I logged in
Nice.
and it popped up. It was like, hey, where can we send your shoes? I'm like, what are you talking about? Shoes. I was like, wow, Gainsight has an awesome swag budget. That's so great. But it was like one of my favorite little things because it's like super random, super timely. You obviously know who I am from a persona
Yeah.
perspective because your systems are tied together. So as a
Yeah.
practitioner, it was also interesting to think about kind of what lies behind that. And so I'm curious if you all have some favorite digital motions that you've seen recently that 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 kind of resonated with you, whether it be your own or somebody else's.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm so congrats on your level 3 and the little
I
pop-up. I
know.
mean, for me, I definitely geek out on a lot of the in-app, in-product walkthroughs and engagements. So you just alluded to one.
Mm,
I mean, probably the most common one that you see is customer onboarding, which is great.
sure.
Something that I'm really excited about, and we've started doing internally, is this notion of outcomes at scale. We talked a little bit about it at Pulse, but when you're not always in a named CSM type of model, right? How can we still understand what our customers care about and then very intentionally curate a journey that's, relevant for that persona and what they're trying to accomplish? So we've started to spin up like in-app engagements. When a customer comes on, they're able to self-select, right? What are their key goals? And then we can come back, check progress, and then we send them, based on that data point, we send them to the relevant events and webinars and the right areas of the platform, et cetera. So we're still experimenting and
Yeah,
obviously, evolving that as we speak.
like
But
everyone is.
yeah, but it's been really cool to see just the level of throughput and how it's been working so far. So that's my favorite because I think that's the next big thing. We've talked about outcomes for a long time, but then everyone's like, okay, that's great, but how the heck do we scale this? So really understanding how that can work end to end. So again, we can then make sure our customers are empowered and enabled to go do it as well.
And I think if you like building what Kelly said, if you look at the whole customer journey, right, you can build digital in every part of it, right? And we actually
Hmm.
luckily had Pulse very recently. So we do these things called game changer awards, which are like people really innovating. And you look at everything from like onboarding, where we had a couple of customers like Samsara and Alteryx, both had this like awesome onboarding process where they have a lot of small customers and they send them through onboarding. And basically, if they haven't achieved certain milestones, then humans are reaching out, but it's very sophisticated about like sending videos and training and sort of a lot of stuff before a human has to reach out. And then you think about adoption, right? Obviously, that's probably the one that people do the most, where you think of like in-app guidance and all that kind of stuff. And there's so much you can do there. Kelly talked about the whole process of just how do you drive outcomes, which is so important.
Hmm.
Then you talk about renewal. One of our customers, Jam, for a long time, they've had this thing where they look at customers that look like they're like very high likelihood renewal, and they actually send them to like a renewal portal, right? Like where you sell service. And then you look at the experience side of it, right? You talked about your shoes
Yeah.
thing, which is a cool example. Another example that we've been doing internally is just which customers can review us on G2, or the obviously in-app surveys, which by the way, in-app surveys plus email, you will absolutely like double your response rate. We saw that
Yeah.
internally, right? So
Oh my
you look
gosh,
at
yeah.
the whole journey, and it's like digital should be built into the entire customer journey.
Yeah. And in a relevant way, tracking outcomes and doing so in an interactive way. I think that's the
Yeah,
holy
that's
grail.
very
And
innovative. Yeah.
yeah, that's super cool. That's super cool. Um, what you guys speak to a lot of C-level folks, obviously, whether it's pre-sale, post-sale, pre-renewal, whatever the flow is. I'm curious to get a perspective and maybe a current state of what what do a lot of C-level executives currently kind of get wrong with regards to digital CS? Like, what is the opinion that you routinely have to dispel?
Yeah, I'll give you my point of view. I think we're still getting some organizations over the hump that digital customer success, it's not just a segmentation
Yeah.
strategy for your long tail of customers. Like they think, oh, well, we can't touch those customers. Like,
Yeah.
and great, that's a good experimentation ground, right? To do some of your A/B testing and learnings. But really still educating folks that this is a segmentation wide customer strategy that should really be a critical strategic program for your business that's going to help scale your organization and ultimately drive better outcomes and an experience for your teammates and your customers. So really educating them through the lens of like investor, customer, and teammate success in terms of the broader business benefits that a program like this can provide.
I love that. And the only thing I'd add in is like what happens to a lot of companies, especially as you get bigger, is you have somebody working on let's say they call it digital customer success, but it's mainly like automated email journeys and maybe humans reaching out if they haven't achieved a milestone. Very common use case with Gainsight, right? But then you have a separate thing happening in the product team where they're doing like in-app guidance and things like that, right? And then you have a separate thing in the support team where they're thinking about like, how do we as a community deflect support tickets? Very common use case as well, right? And you might have a separate thing in marketing where we're thinking about like, how do we email customers about like, upsell and so on. And the thing is, they're all digital, but like that's just a terrible customer experience.
It's all these pockets of stuff.
It's all these pockets. And most companies end up doing that. So the second thing I would add to what Kellie said is digital needs to be a multi-channel strategy defined in one cohesive way around the customer journey and like what the customer's objectives are, right? It can't just be a bunch of silos. And most companies today are a bunch of silos. Now, of course, that's a little self-promotional because Gainsight, we're trying to solve this. Like we now have community and in-app and email and all. But I think it's like the way that has to go. Like it's crazy, right? And what happens right now is that digital becomes very ineffective if it's a bunch of silos. Because the customer gets an email from marketing and there's a separate one from a salesperson, a separate thing from CS, and there's like an in-app that's not coordinated with that at all. And so then basically
they all look different. They're from different. It's
totally.
Like
and what happens? We tune it out as humans, right? Like you go to some web pages and like there's like 15 pop-ups that are like different ads or what. Like you just completely tune that out, right? But you think of something like social media, inline advertising in social media, where it's super targeted. Right? Whether it's like an Instagram or Facebook or TikTok or whatever. And honestly, like I bought a lot of stuff through those because they're actually like highly relevant, right? Maybe even the shirt, I think possibly. And so like, that's the difference where how do you get to a point where it's like super relevant? You're not just spamming your customers. And today I'd argue most kind of digital stuff, because it's not integrated, is spamming the customer.
Yeah. I completely agree. And it leads to just crazy disjointed programs.
Totally.
And also,
ineffective.
And you're getting all this amazing input and then it's not connected in some way on the back end. And then your customer, it's like the equivalent of like GDPR, allow all cookies kind of pop-ups. You just allow on every single website you go to.
Yeah, seriously.
Well, that leads me nicely. Thank you for the segue into my next question, which is around org structure. Nick, you celebrated the fact that there are so many, chief customer officers being promoted recently, and especially among women. And kudos to you for kind of calling that out in your keynote and whatnot. But where do you see orgs evolving as more and more customers and just companies are gathering around the fireside, so to speak, of the customer journey, right?
Yeah.
Is that changing the landscape a little bit?
Absolutely. It's funny. I talked about this at Pulse, and I'd love to have Kellie share maybe the real world of her experience because your org is expanded. What I shared at Pulse was like, in the old world, right? You had like product, marketing, sales, and like what you might call support or services or something, right? And what a lot of companies did was they built like a new function called customer success. And that new function was like almost like, okay, we're going to solve all the problems. You guys just keep doing what you're doing. And we're going to solve all the churn and retention, all that kind of stuff. And, most CS orgs in like 5-7 years ago, they had some impact, but usually the leader quickly figured out that if we don't align all of that journey together, it's not going to scale. It's not really going to have the impact we want to. You just can't do it as a silo. And so what most people did was create some kind of like a chief customer officer and put kind of quote unquote post-sales roles. I think post-sales is kind of a dated term, but we'll go with it. And they put like services and support, customer success, training, community, digital programs, operations, all under kind of one leader. And that was sort of what I'd call kind of like the CCO, like first iteration. How do we create that integrated org? And funnily enough, right before this, I was talking to one of our customers that's like a big SaaS company, and like the person was running CS, and he's actually moving on, and like now they're merging CS and support and services. So this is happening like all the time. right? And obviously at Gainsight, we're trying to kind of follow that and be like, okay, we'll connect training and support and community and all that together, customer success. Now there's a cutting edge, which is, okay, if we're doing all that, maybe we should move things like renewals and upsell and maybe even like some part of pre-sale. So you have like a continuum from like what the customer sees to what they get. And Kellie, maybe you can talk about your org's evolution, because I think it's a good example of that.
Yeah. So I guess keying off of what Nick just mentioned. So I've been in the CCO role at Gainsight for 2.5 years plus now. Wow. It's flying by, Nick.
Fast. I didn't realize.
And so originally, my charter is kind of your traditional, we'll say, post-sales org, right? With basically, I had 4 key pillars: the CSM org, the services org, the support org, and then we do have a centralized ops, and that's actually where all of our scale programs run out of. But more recently, as we were kind of, designing the org of the future, we actually have brought the account management team under the CCO remit as well. So that team is responsible. Basically, that brings over renewals and expansion end to end, which it's been amazing. I mean, we're still pretty early days with it, but just the level of collaboration, especially when you think about organizations like where we're at, and we have different products right now, and just that collaboration and account planning that needs to happen, and making sure that you're having the right resources and the swim lanes defined. It's been a really, exciting kind of, marriage, so to speak, between the two organizations. And for me, it really helps me kind of shape and define every piece of that customer journey from beginning to end, which again, I have like more things I can go figure out and solve, which is fun.
And I think that what's really, really cool about that, I mean, first of all, Kellie committed to doubling the cross-sell number. Right, Kellie? But on top of that, which was really cool, obviously I had incredible confidence because Kellie's such a performance-oriented leader. And I think that's the only way that this works for CCOs, if they can show that they can own, like a big number like this. But a couple other things that I think like drove it for us. One was, as I mentioned, we ourselves are becoming a multi-product company.
Yeah.
And so cross-sell is actually super important, right? And it's not just like the organic upsell that comes, but like cross-sell. So like the team that's doing the cross-sell being underneath Kellie's huge. But then you look at the renewals and like, a lot of companies have like CSMs and renewals as like totally separate orgs. And they end up like not aligning as well. But from a customer perspective, it's all like a continuum. They're not like, oh, is this a CSM thing or renewal? This is like all tied together. And so I'm super excited.
Talk to this guy or this guy,
this person, right? And I'm super excited about the collaboration between like the groups that's going to come out of that. So that's another thing, which is just like more seamless customer experience, more cross-sell, and obviously all under a leader who can really drive performance and double the cross-sell number. So
I think it's down those barriers, Nick, like as hard as you try, of just like what people feel like are, incentives and stuff that like, don't match up. We can really bring it together under one, North Star mission, which is good.
It's staggering too how many CS orgs are resistant to owning revenue in a way. Like it's a thing. And, I think you find similar kind of similar situations with support, for instance, where some CS orgs own it, some it's a product organization, so there's those little exceptions that are all over the place, and everybody does it slightly differently, which is interesting.
Yeah, it's funny too. I think this resisting revenue is a real career opportunity for people, which is like a couple of things I'd say. Number one, you don't want to be in an org that doesn't tie to a financial metric. That's just not good for your own career, especially in a cost-cutting world, right? And number two is I think there's this story that people tell themselves that if I own revenue, I can't be aligned to the customer's needs. And I'd argue it's the opposite. If you're owning revenue, and most people that like own revenue, like care about the customer too. And there's a win-win. When Kellie's team gets customers to use our digital hub or PX in product technology or other things, like it's helping the customer. It's not hurting the customer, right? This is where I think there's this big problem in CS where people think like revenue is not aligned with the customer's needs. And I'd argue if you truly believe that, like if your company sells more, it's not aligned, then you should go to a different company. Like you should be in a company where you are proud of what you're selling and it's actually helping the customer.
Well, and the way I articulate that, like to the team, is like think of it as a value journey, right? And we constantly have to push them up that value journey maturity curve. And as they climb that journey, like they're going to want to do more use cases. And that's how expansion happens. So it's actually helping them as they're achieving more value. It's a win-win partnership, right? And the business is getting more revenue in return. So I think it's a mindset shift that a lot of people don't understand how those two things can
imagine that tying product solutions to intended customer outcomes. Like, why is that such a novel idea? I no shade at Dell at all, but I worked some time at Dell, and I remember there was a point at which like the consumer sales folks were incentivized to like attach printer cables and stuff like that. I was like, what is that? How is that
Printer cables,
helping
I like
anything?
that.
Yeah, it's like stupid stuff like that. So back on the leadership front, we see there are a growing number of women in leadership positions in CS now, which is awesome to see. But I would argue that it's probably, as with most things in terms of diversity and equity, we're not there yet. And I've had the great pleasure of interviewing a lot of women leaders in CS, which is awesome.
That's awesome.
But I'm curious to get your take on the current state, and also what proactively we can be doing to continue changing that in CS.
Yeah, I love that question. First off, I'll start by saying I think comparatively, like customer success as a profession is in a better spot than some other professions. So I get to meet with CS executives day in and day out, which is part of what energizes me about my job. And I'd say it's almost like equally probably females and males that I interact with. I think it's at the C-suite level, like at the VP level, we have a better mix.
Totally.
Start to climb to the C level. I think that's where there's still some inequity that we need to solve for. So, I know I'm involved in like several different women in CS groups. And I think part of this is just coming together and kind of teaching others and how they can elevate themselves. How do they have that conversation? I just presented at one that Deloitte hosts last week. It's called Amplify, Women in CS. So I'm seeing more groundswell and energy happen there, where proactively the women in CS are kind of locking arms to really keep this movement going. But I think it's also people like, Nick, humble brag on you, but it takes men as well. Like it can't just be the women. It takes, amazing leaders like men who have a commitment to this, right? To really drive that type of change. And thankfully, we're seeing more and more of that show up. But Nick, would be curious from your perspective, because you've done a great job at this.
That's
and I don't even, sometimes I take it for granted, and then I talk to other women who are struggling to get to the C-suite, or they're like the one female in the C-suite as well, which is another problem.
Totally.
So curious what Nick would add to this.
You said it so well. I think part of it is like, it's not like honestly, people always position as like a training or development thing. It's honestly just like opening your eyes. Like there's a lot of very talented women out there. It's not like a thing, especially you think about customer success. Oh my gosh. Like you said, at the VP level, there's so many. And I have found the same thing where like at the very top level, it seems to be like not as balanced. I haven't done a formal study, but we did look at the CSM population. This is a couple years ago, Alex, and it was like 50-50 or something like that. It was like extremely balanced, but it felt like the further up you go, it was like less balanced. And I think it's just like part of it's opening your eyes and be like, actually, there's a lot of talent inside our company, right? Sometimes, by the way, it might be like saying, hey, do we need to go outside, or can we promote one of our VPs? Honestly, that's what happened to Kellie, right? And so I think some of it's just like being aware of the talent you have or the talent that's out there. I think the other thing that's kind of cool is it's sort of maybe a segue is this is then elevating the like diversity of management teams and boards as well. And I think to Kellie's point, it's like this whole idea of the one woman or anyone that is like the one of their group that's like different than everyone else. And it's not like a super sustainable situation. So, for example, at Gainsight, we're super fortunate to have a number of women on our management team. And honestly, each of them got there on their own merits and wasn't anything specific, but it's just a better balance as a team then, right? So part of it is you can't ever solve it with one. But what's kind of cool is as women and other people from underrepresented backgrounds go kind of move up through CS, it's because CS is becoming more important. It's naturally then taking them to other roles. I mean, literally, right before, or this morning, we had like one of our customers who's like an early CS leader at LinkedIn, Rolly Saxena. She's like now a CEO of a company, right? I showed it at like Pulse. All of these people moving from CS to like CRO, CEO, and a number of them were women, right? Like, and it's just like that path from like CSM to VP to CCO to maybe CRO and then CEO. That's a legit path. And by the way, then like board member, I have like CCO friends who are on the boards of companies, right? Public companies. So you look at that whole continuum, it's there for people now. It requires, leaders to like open their eyes. And then honestly, like, people from underrepresented backgrounds to go when they see that opportunity, like Kellie did, to go run after it. Right. So
there's an empowerment piece, like you're saying, too. Not be afraid to go for
totally
it.
Don't. Yeah.
As a working mother too, also helping people like
there's some trade-offs people really
that
have.
you can do it all.
Totally.
You just have to figure out a way to kind of situate it and make it work.
And actually, it's funny because this is where I think not everyone company is different, but I think like the remote work model does allow for not just women, anyone that has things outside of work to like actually be able to do a little bit more of like, I'm going to pursue my career and take care of kids or aging parents or somebody else, right? Like you can do both. It's still hard. Like we're all multitasking and it's really hard, but I think it's actually like more doable now in this new world.
Yeah, I totally agree. And on I suppose, somewhat related note, for those that are just now entering the workforce, it is unprecedented times right now. I think in order to try to get a gig in tech or anywhere really, and I'd be curious as to what advice or what guidance you offer to folks who maybe just fresh college grads or looking for their first inroads in as a CSM or anything really.
Yeah, I can start. For me, this was, I guess, hammered into me early days in my career, but it was always like attitude and activity. And I think that translates to what we like to say at Gainsight, which is bulldog mentality. So I think, especially in a world in which you really kind of need to create a name for yourself, and usually that's through some level of impact that you're having, really taking initiative and ownership of things that you're doing. So when I reflect on my career, it's not just like, hey, saying, oh, like this isn't working, but like, oh, I see an opportunity, like taking gaps and turning them into opportunities, and not always waiting for somebody else to do them. Like take it by the horns. Go do it. It's gonna be self-serving for you and your role, but then it's gonna have broader impact. And I think those types of things really show, leadership. Whether you want to stay as an IC or like transfer into a formal leader, like that's the type of things that will really help you stand out from the crowd, in my opinion.
I love that. And the only things I'd add in are like, I think if you're fortunate enough, like be able to work at a company that has a great training program, even if it's a bigger company, like Kellie, you were at ADP early on, right? And ADP has like a great training program, and it's sort of like one of those companies that people are like, okay, if they work there, they've really been developed a lot. I think that's huge. You did that. And then like another one that like I've thought about is, just you have to be flexible. Unfortunately, like especially in this economy, like you can define your perfect spec, but realistically, like it's so competitive. So, that might mean starting in sales or an SDR. By the way, there's some people, a lot of people in CSM that started in more like service industry, like let's say hospitality or whatever. And those skills are actually quite valuable. And by the way, right now, unfortunately, tech's not hiring much, but hospitality is hiring like crazy, right?
Crazy.
And, like, it's tough, like not everyone that aspires to be in tech was like thinking about that. But honestly, you can move into those companies, you can move up really quickly. And then sometimes you can break into tech, right? That kind of thing happens. I think that's an opportunity as well. And then sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to say your point about hospitality is spot on, because one of my previous companies, we served the hospitality industry, primarily restaurants, and we hired 70% from the hospitality industry. I had never had to do any customer service training because those folks know how to work for tips and get stuff done and achieve customer success. Yeah.
And a lot of CS organizations, if they're sell to verticals, they hire from that vertical. So I think that's a really good generalizable point. The last thing I'd say is I think that, one of the challenges is if you know what everyone else knows, you're not that differentiated. But if you know something most people don't know, you're actually quite differentiated. So a simple example of that now is if you're like super deep on generative AI and like you go into your interview, you're like, hey, look, this I'm using generative AI to contact customers or whatever, you're going to stand out in that interview. So what I would, if I were somebody like trying to break in, it's like, what is the cutting edge? And how do you get to that cutting edge so that everyone else doesn't know it, And that's something that I don't think enough people lean into. And, unfortunately, if you're in a situation where you have time, which, I feel for people that do when they're looking, like that's the time to go like get super cutting edge. So then you look really differentiated to that employer.
It's like, by the way, that resume you're looking at, that profile image you're looking at, generative AI.
Nice.
Alex, one last thing I'd add, especially for CS professionals, which goes back to probably the commentary we were having earlier, is like I teach my team, like I look for adaptability quotient.
Yeah,
that's what I call it. Like
right.
CS is ever evolving. You're going to have good days. You're going to have really hard days. Like, so is there a way that you can demonstrate that you're versatile and kind of even keel? You don't ride the highs too high. You don't ride the lows too low. So those are your best like CSM, CS leaders, etc. So adaptability quotient is the other big one for me.
I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have those really horrid calls. You got to be able to roll into the next call.
Totally.
And nothing happened.
Yeah. What's the next best thing we can control? That's what I tell the team. Like,
That's
it's
right.
not always perfect, but what can you control?
Exactly. We're going to take a quick left turn and then it'll be time to wrap it up. I want to get your hot takes on customer scoring, customer health scoring, and whether you prefer as an executive walking into an account, looking at a Gainsight, 360 summary or whatever. Do you prefer to have your health score be as predictive as possible and give you, as much kind of forewarning into an issue, or do you prefer to have a customer score that provides all the details and gives you all the nitty gritty about where the issues are, and or is it a combo of both? Like, what's your philosophy and your personal preference?
Yeah, I could start. So I think the key component for me is a customer health score needs to be actionable. Like it's great if you're like, oh, it's green, but like I need to understand the components so I know what to go do about it, right?
Yeah.
So for me, customer health scores, I always say is like the compass of the business. So I want to know how it's trending, but I want it to be an early warning system, but one that's actionable. So we have I'm sure you've heard it, Alex, but we have a acronym we call DEAR. That's for the outcomes piece. So that's the more objective side of our scorecard: deployment, engagement, adoption, ROI. So the activities my team is doing are then feeding what I think of as like the leading indicators, which then I can constantly be controlling or running plays against, so that way the lagging outcomes turn out in the way that we want them to be. So to me, the health score is really the compass that kind of connects what's happening and what are the high value things we're doing, how are we trending and tracking, and then ultimately that's going to drive the retention, expansion, etc. So it's a blend of like some level of predictiveness for sure using data, but there needs to also be some subjective inputs too from your CSMs and surveys and things like that. So it's a good combination, but I like to have enough detail or granularity where it at least tells me what I need to go do about it.
Yeah, I think oh, sorry, go ahead, Alex.
Go.
Only thing I'd add in, because like Kellie summarizes it so well in terms of the quantitative. Now, if you're saying you're about to go meet a customer, there is the subjective side, and this is a total shameless plug, but I think actually you could do it in a lot of different ways with Gainsight or without, which is like you have so much data about the customer that's sort of like, who are the key people and like what are the goals and like what are the recent issues we've had. And so we built something called Cheat Sheet, which basically takes those top questions and like amazingly, I'm still blown away that it like works. It uses GPT, the Chat GPT type technology, and like scans all the data again. So it gives you like this summary. And it's like, I wouldn't say it's 100% accurate, but it's like
Sure.
90%. And so whether you're doing it that way or some more manual way, like you do need to understand some of the human dynamics. Who are the key people? What's changing? Some of that isn't always in the health score, so to speak, right? So
Yeah, I can't wait to use cheat sheet. It's going to be good.
It's really good. Yeah.
I like to coach my digital CSMs actually as the health score is basically your departure point. It's like you get some sort of indication. You need to go look at their health score. What's the departure? Like where do you need to go to from here to
Yeah. That's a good
like
way to say
do
it.
some further investigation or whatever? But yeah, that's cool. I like the blend, so to
Yeah,
speak.
and I think obviously as you get more digital, like if you have do digital tiers, you're naturally going to have to rely on the data even that much more, right? And the predictiveness, but that can, there's some variance across the segments.
Yep. Well, as we start to wrap up, I would love to first off get a little bit of an insight into each of your content diets, so to speak.
Huh.
Mm.
What are you consuming to keep abreast of things that are happening, podcasts, books, whatever? Nick, we know you wrote a couple things, but maybe
Yeah.
some things besides that.
Yeah, I mean, I think like LinkedIn is actually super valuable because you get to like
Mm,
scan things like from a business perspective. Twitter's good too, or Facebook threads or whatever. But like, I think LinkedIn's really good for staying on top of just business stuff and also just like your clients and what's happening. So I find that to be very valuable. Podcast wise, like I should bring up my app, but I think All In Podcast is quite good in terms of just like what's
yeah.
happening in technology. They're kind of funny. They're a little self-absorbed if you've listened to it, but it's actually
Hmm.
quite good. There's some like VCs and stuff like that on there. I think that's a good one. I think another one, if you want to stay on top of the cutting edge, is actually the Lex Friedman podcast, which I love. Which is Lex
Mm,
Friedman's like a computer scientist at MIT, and he somehow is able to interview. He interviewed Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk. He gets everyone on there, and right now he's a
cool.
lot of good things about generative AI and where it's going. So I think that's another good one I'd recommend. How about you, Kelly? What do you read or listen?
Yeah, so I've been, I guess, from a podcast perspective, a lot of the same probably outlets that Nick just mentioned, but from a podcast perspective, the one that I've been listening to recently is How I Built
Oh,
This.
I've heard that's good.
It's a
Yeah.
good one.
Yeah, I just
It's a good
started
one.
getting into it, so not too many episodes deep, but it's fun to kind of hear more about the journey of some of these companies and the behind the scenes stuff. So if you're into that, then check it out.
One that's been coming up a lot with guests recently, and I've gotten into as well as My First Million. Have you
Oh
have you
no,
guys
I've
checked
heard of
that
that.
one out?
Oh, I haven't, but that sounds like a good one.
Yeah.
I'm like, I heard millions. I'm in.
Yeah, it's incredible. They publish 3 times a week, which is
Wow.
insane. But it's some really amazing stuff for
Well, the
sure.
other one I've heard really good is the Digital CS podcast, Alex. So that's a
Yeah,
Oh,
that's a
nice
big one.
one.
That's a
Good.
that's a
That's a good one.
I
must
love
listen.
it.
Um, Last question is your opportunity to shout some folks out. I know we already kind of talked about a couple during our conversation, but who's doing really cool things in digital CS right now that you want to give some props to?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Nick grabbed onto some of them,
Yeah.
but I'll tell you some other, like, I guess, larger name ones. Okta's been a
Yeah.
trailblazer for us for a long time, in terms of really kind of pushing the curve, and just being very, I guess, ahead of the game with respect to digital. So they have a whole team and strategy built around it. I always get inspired when I join their EBRs. And then Concur is another good one as
Yeah.
well. They've had incredible just success in terms of digital EBRs and all these things, and actual quantitative impact back to the business. So those are two bigger brand ones to call out.
Yeah. The only other one I'd add in, I mean, there's so many, but like another one that comes to mind is one that a company probably not most people know about, but it's actually decent size called Muse, MEWS. And it's like the
Hmm.
hospitality technology company for Europe. So maybe
Hmm.
similar, Alex, to what the field you used to
Yeah.
work in, but they built
Hmm.
a big business in Europe. And what I love about them, and actually some of the companies Kelly mentioned, is like there's companies that lean into the future of technology, right? They like, I'm sure you have those
Right.
customers, Alex, as well, where they're like not afraid and like they're not like, oh, we don't want to be early adopter. They want to try. Like they have all the Gainsight technology. They're tying it together, and and I think they're just customers like that like are the ones that make the future. And there's other ones that are like, it's okay, no disrespect to them, but they're like, okay, I'm going to wait for like the third version of it, right? So, and to each their own. But I think those people that do lean into the future are the ones that we all follow, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
That's awesome.
Man, Amazing. Well, I am very appreciative of your time. I know an hour isn't easy to come by. And so thank you for joining. And it's a pleasure having both of you on.
You ask great questions. Thanks so much, Alex.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Digital Customer Success Podcast. If you like what we're doing, or don't for that matter, consider leaving us a review on your podcast platform of choice. You can view the Digital Customer Success definition word map and get more information about the show at digitalcustomersuccess.com. My name is Alex Turkovich. Thanks again for joining, and we'll see you next time.